Welcome.
Thank you. Thank
Very
you very
nice to
much.
see you. So, you're relatively new to Premise. Before having started this, your previous business, you had a somewhat controversial perspective out of Silicon Valley, and that is that government actually matters. And
Yeah, just a little bit, right?
even today, I think there are pockets where that would be in dispute. But you were right. You built a very successful business. I want you to start today by telling us what could we be doing differently in the development sector with that same mentality.
Yeah, I think that it is a great analogy because when I first came to Silicon Valley in 2000, we had a thesis and a belief that people wanted to engage with governments and they wanted to be able to do it on their terms, not on the government's terms. So, as opposed to actually bringing City Hall to you, so you have to go down to City Hall. The idea was to bring it to the citizens' doorsteps, so that on a day-to-day basis they would have visibility on what was going on with whatever projects that they were working on, or essentially what's important to them. So when we think about that from an international development standpoint, and a lot of the projects that we have working here, these projects get designed early on, maybe 2 or 3 years before they actually get awarded. And so what we think that Premise has the capability to do is to provide a measuring stick, a measurement tool to be able to establish what's going on a day-to-day basis. So as you said in your example, which I thought was amazing, around the lean processes and iterative design, is that Premise can help be that steering wheel, which helps basically drive the car through the different parts of the program that enables us to achieve maximum success.
Yeah, what I like so much about the tomato example and the inflation example is that it's very tangible. These numbers mean something. Talk about the network. I mentioned 80,000, but how do you build that network? How can you grow that network? I read something, David Soloff, the founder of Premise, 5 years ago, said that by now, if the network were 3,000 to 4,000, he would be thrilled.
Well, he's ecstatic now, right?
Now it's 80,000. Talk about how that network grows and where you see it heading.
Well, we use online tools, Twitter, social media, other aspects of social media like Facebook, to basically get the word out, essentially take pictures, make money. And what we're doing is we're trying to find smartphone users in the 4 corners of the world that will download our app, and then we run them through a training process that essentially makes them taskable. And so they're part of this huge marketplace that we're building, which will continue. We think it will grow exponentially over the next few years. 80,000 today could be 1 million in 3 or 4 years. I mean, that's kind of the big vision here.
And I also want to mention, I think I buried the lead a bit, because not only do you have this global community who's giving signals and feedback that we can all use in program design and implementation, but you're paying them.
Correct. Yes. Well, that's they download the app, we run them through a training process, and part of that at the end is to take information from them so that we can pay them for their work. So essentially, we task them to go take a picture of a tomato in the marketplace, or walk the specific route and let us know how long it takes. So we're really getting into the details about what's going on in a specific city or region. So we're really getting to that ground truth. I mean, people use social media right now to provide signals about what's going on in different regions. What I think that we're able to do is basically have a verified resource to basically provide our customers with that specific feedback.
That's right. And there's a bit of an elephant in the room. You mentioned social media, so I'll pick up that thread. There are issues with data. There are issues with people sharing their data. What is Premise doing that you think is different, or that you think is relevant to the global conversation, really, that we're having about data privacy and how data from global communities are used?
Well, I think the primary piece is that we're essentially tasking our contributors to go collect data for us, and we're paying them for it. So it's not like we're part of this, people who might be collecting data on their users and then sharing it unknowingly to them. I think that's kind of the frustrating part from our perspective. And when I say our, I mean everybody in the world. But from what we see is that we want, the data revolution, giving people more information is really crucial at this point in time, because we need to have eyes and ears everywhere to be able to understand the value of our programs. And Premise is kind of at the front end of that, because we are a data collection source for our customers. We help them gather the information that they need to make their decisions about how to be better, about how to be more efficient. And we're doing that in a way that's a value add to both our end customers, but also to those contributors, because we're paying them for work. So we're keeping money in these communities that are, a lot of times, they don't have economic opportunity. So we feel like that we're doing a really good thing by providing that service as well.
And maintaining the quality over time. The other piece that I want to engage is, because there's the other side of the data, the users, the end users of the insights that you come up with. What about data quality and trust? How do you make sure? I mean, you're paying people, I get that.
Correct.
And they're providing information, which sometimes has perverse consequences. As soon as payment enters the game, different things can happen. What steps does Premise take to sort of ensure that when I receive data as a client, that I can really put stock in what's
It's actually a great question, because at the highest level it seems simple, right? You have a task, you assign someone that task, they pick it up, they perform it, and they send it back to you. But the challenge becomes there are people in the world, believe it or not, who might try to take advantage of such a simple system. So we have a very strong group of data scientists and fraud detection systems that basically enable us to collect this data and clean it before we deliver it to the end customer. I mean, there's nothing that is more frustrating than when you get data that you think is is positive or negative and giving you signal, but it turns out to be fraudulent. So there's a very strong component to the methodologies that we put in place that help pick this up. I mean, as you mentioned, I think David was here 3 or 4 years ago evangelizing the company. The company's been around for 6 years. We're very well funded by the leading groups in Silicon Valley, and we've spent an enormous amount of care in building out a system that is both scalable and secure to be able to provide the types of solutions and data that will make our customers comfortable.
I want to put you on the spot here, mostly out of curiosity. What is the percentage of task feedback that gets rejected in the course of a month, on a percentage basis?
Well, we've kind of divided up the world into different places, and so different parts of the world, we see different, different types of feedbacks. But I would say we pick up somewhere between 5 and 10% of what we would quote unquote call bad data that we need to reject.
And I did want to talk about that as well, because as those of us in the room who have programs in different regions, where is your network very strong? Where are you focused on growing it? I assume that happens in dialogue and concert with partners, but but you're also doing this thing of having a permanent standing network globally. So where are you strong? How do you grow, and where are you focused?
Well, we go wherever our clients ask us. I mean, that's the bottom line. So, really tough places to reach, and places that are more developed and westernized. So, we're not, we don't exclude any specific region. We are setting up networks in 30 different cities and metro areas around the world, where we can really consolidate and basically feed the network so that we have a group of contributors who are always with us. But that isn't, the sole place where we want to be. Right. We want to be where we can be most helpful and use our technology in the most efficient way.
So I want to sort of start to wrap up by thinking about the future. I mean, one of the big themes here is not just the possible of what we've done, and I think most people will agree that what Premise has achieved in its short 6 years is quite impressive. What's next? In other words, what other technologies are you seeing that are just beyond grasp, just beyond the potential to partner with you? Because you're building a really impressive Swiss Army knife, and you need to find the kinds of partners, not just intellectually, but also in terms of other kinds of technological capacities that might impact the future. So what kinds of partners do you look for, and who works?
I think that one of the things that you pointed out earlier is this influx of data that goes into people's systems, and how do they consume that, and how do they work with the various signals that get spun off from that. So one of the things that I think that Premise is well positioned to do is to basically be a verifier of that signal that you think is being generated. There's various programs out there that will ingest data from Twitter. So Data Miner is an example where they'll ingest a lot of information from Twitter and then provide third parties with signal on their own brands or what, it could be a whole wide variety of things. And what Premise is able to do is basically take that signal and spin off tasks to go actually verify it.
Right.
So that if you think there's something going on with your brand or your program or whatever it could be, Premise can be your partner to help verify to make sure that that's indeed what's happening. So it's almost like the same way that people use audit firms.
Right. And there's a strong element that we talked about as well about the visual verification. We talk about monitoring and evaluation. If you want to see how a school's doing, if you want to see how long a clinic line is, having photographic evidence of that is
exactly.
unusual.
Yeah, exactly. You're really drilling down to the ground truth.
Yeah.
So the technology, arming people with smartphones is really what's made this possible. You think about the revolution around what smartphones have done just on our day-to-day lives, what it's helped doing to Premise and how it can help international development is phenomenal. I mean, what I would say is that, I see a lot of these programs, and back from my experience in working with government, is that they get designed very early, so 18 months, 24 months in advance. And what my call to action on everyone here is to basically start designing systems like Premise into the final outputs. Because if you don't do it now, if you don't start doing it in advance, it's going to take a long time for it to get implemented and running.
Right. You've given me a good pivot here. I want to get Susan involved. Where is Susan? Susan is the president and COO of the International Youth Foundation. Most of you probably know her from her distinguished career at USAID, serving as the counselor for the agency, which is the most senior foreign service officer role. And in your role with youth, I'd like to, and also with your background in Haiti and Colombia, I'd love to hear a little bit about how these kinds of approaches could have impacted the work that you've done, but more importantly, about the work that you're heading toward.
Absolutely. Well, good morning, everybody, and it's just great to hear about Premise and the work you're doing. I've been following it, but just to know this is an incredible resource, I think, for all of us, and it was great you started with saying government matters, and I guess even though I'm proudly with the International Youth Foundation, I did spend 25 years in government, and as you were talking, I thought about so many times we could have used this as we were trying to solve real problems on the ground. Part of it, as you mentioned, is this gap we have often. We're designing programs, but by the time we actually get to the ground, the situation is so fluid. And as we know, it's not just fluid at a country level, at a regional level, at a local level. And it's so important we always have the pulse. Situation, Priya is here, and she remembers when we were doing the Haiti earthquake response, and every single day we were trying to gather data and just understanding what was happening on the ground. That was January 2010 after the earthquake, but we've come a long way, but we can go so much further. In Colombia, we were gathering data through a human rights verification early warning system, but it was all manual. And to think today, and again, to get it into the government's hands in order to push policymakers, in order to push, obviously, the military and maybe some of the actors who wanted to spoil the peace process, say this is really happening. And we have technology now to do that. So this is super exciting. But now looking to the future, and one of the reasons I was really excited to join the International Youth Foundation is because they actually published the first global youth well-being index, which uses public available data on the well-being of youth around the world. But as we just published it last year, we also used the Millennium Viewpoint Survey, really having youth voices. And I want to applaud Devex for having so many youth voices here today, and fellows, that's absolutely outstanding, but we need to do more of this. And I think the call to action, as we looked at data from around the world, 30 countries where 70% of the youth live, and what they were saying and their well-being, and listening to their voice, but knowing that data can become stale. And so being able to have fresh data and fresh voices, particularly as we drive towards the SDGs, because many of us are talking about this cohort 2030, in a sense. They are the ones who will demand that we make progress on the SDGs, and they also will help. Well, they'll lead the delivery of the SDGs, but we need to have their voice at the table. And tools that you have developed and this network, what I find so interesting is that it truly is a network that I think has incredible potential, and would love to hear from you how you think this network could even build more so as we move forward towards the SDGs, and what all of us could do in order to really activate those voices, which will lead us into the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Susan. And I think the SDG reference is salient. I think we can all feel awed by the challenge that we have posed for ourselves. And the thing that people say often is that, well, we need to kind of figure out ways to do things differently, to do things together, to get to that final result. And the one point that I think want everyone to leave with is, let's try and get more feedback mechanisms. Let's try and get more information about right track, wrong track, because that is ultimately, and this is your word, the efficacy of program design and implementation. So I want to thank you, Maury, very much, and Susan as well.
Thank you.